God, you don't go to work for me. But I bet you won't tell God to get the paycheck for you. Why? Because I didn't do that, God. You work for me, but I go get the paycheck. And matter of fact, God, I even spend it. I don't need you to help me do that neither. But you want him to do everything else. You want him to do everything else. But yet, when it comes to him, he simply asks you to love one another. And that's hard for you to do. But Paul said, with all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another and love. He's simply saying, listen, humble yourself. It's hard for people to humble themselves. You know, one of the hardest things for people to do is to say, I'm sorry. It's hard for people to say, I'm sorry. They'll give you a watermelon, they'll give you an apple, they'll give you a peach, but they won't say, I'm sorry. That apple is supposed to represent, I'm sorry. But they won't say, I'm sorry out their mouth. But I take you out to lunch. You know what I'm saying? I take you out to lunch. But they won't say, I'm sorry. But I take them out to lunch. That'll show them that I'm sorry. I buy them a gift. That'll show them that I'm sorry. But they won't say, I am sorry. Those are some hard words for people to say. But it ain't no problem to spend $100. But it's hard to say, I'm sorry. And he's saying, listen, forbearing one another and love. Learn to be humble. Learn to be gentle. Learn to have patience with each other. Learn to have patience with each other. And when a little baby learn to walk, you have to have patience with them. Because when they start walking, you have to follow them around. Do you realize when they start walking, you have to move everything out of the way that they can pull over? Why do you do that? Because you love them. Then, if you love God, why don't you move all that little stuff out the way? Why don't you move all that little hatred and that little bitterness? Why can't you move that out the way? You take the time and you move all that stuff out the way, and I said, why you move that? But I don't want them to fall. I don't want them to pull nothing down. So you make sure you get everything out of the way so that that little baby can learn how to walk without hurting themselves. But when it comes to the Spirit of God and the things of God, you don't move nothing out the way. You leave all the hatred and the bitterness and the dislike and you leave all that stuff there. Well, if you really love God, when you move it out of the way, so that he could do a work in you like he want to, isn't that love? Isn't that showing God that you love him by doing that? Getting all those things out of your house that shouldn't be in the house. All those things out the closet that shouldn't be in the closet. Isn't that showing God that you love him? Moving all of that stuff out. Because you love God. But if you don't love God, then you keep all that stuff in there. Loving one another. For endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. In other words, you are working and making every effort that you can to keep the unity in the body. You know one thing about a house, if something is wrong, it ain't going to be no peace in that house. Boy, if she's upset, you can forget it. There is no peace. And y'all know what I'm talking about. There is no peace in that house of some. Yeah, on your job, if you got something against somebody, there's no peace on your job, is it? You go this way, you never go the way while your problem is. You always go another way. Why? Because there is no unity in the house. And the thing about the house of God, he said that we are to work to keep the unity of the body intact. We are to be patient with each other. We are to be gentle with each other. We are to be kind with each other. Because if you're not these, then what are you? Look at what God put up with you. Look at all the things that God went through with you. Why? Because he loved you. And because he loved you, he was willing to put up with all of that. All of the things you're sneaking around thinking you're getting away with. All the things you're doing that you think nobody knew you was doing. Then God is simply saying, if you love me, then why are you doing these things? If you love me. There are families that can't come together. Y'all know some of the things I'm talking about. You know why some of the families can't come together? Because they can't get along. So you know what they do? They only fellowship with the one they can get along with. The one they can't get along with, they just leave them alone. That's a weird family, isn't it? Well, I can get along with these, but I can't get along. You're all in the same family. What is the problem? Who refuse to humble themselves? Who refuse to say, I'm sorry? But this is what they say. Ain't my fault. Ain't my fault. Look in the mirror. And you might find out it is your fault. You say, but I didn't do nothing. Look in the mirror, and you might find out that you did do something. But when you talk against the body, then why is the love? Why is the endeavoring to keep the peace? How do you keep the peace when you're talking against? You know what's wrong with America right there? Everybody's talking against it. That's the problem. Because they're not working together. That's simple. So here's my question. Where is the love? We said in God we trust. Then why is the love? Jesus is very simple. He said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And the greatest commandment is to love one another. So why is the problem? Why is the problem? The problem is not in America. The problem is in us. Because we don't love one another. We're not patient with one another. We're not gentle with one. I don't mean lustful. Don't get me wrong there, please. People will take that the wrong way. But I mean in the spirit of unity for a country that needs love, not lust. He says, for brethren, ye have been called into liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but love serve one another. In other words, he's saying, for brethren, but ye have been called into freedom. And because you were called into freedom, don't use that for the lust glory. Don't use that for the flesh glory. He called you to liberty so that you could have peace. He called you into liberty so that you could realize that he wants to use you for spiritual things. And Paul is saying,